Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled People Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. My pregnant daughter demands I raise her baby for her. After that, I went from school teacher to chairman of the board of a big company for the sake of revenge. And after that, am I the jerk for pulling my horse from public lessons? Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen has to raise her own baby. I will as soon as you get me one, Reddit boy. So please smash that like button and subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. My pregnant daughter demands I raise her baby for her. Hello, I am a 56-year-old mother to 33-year-old Kelly and grandmother to 16-year-old Opal. Kelly became pregnant with Opal at 16. My husband, Eddie, and I have always believed in having the right to choose. However, Kelly insisted that she wanted to keep the baby and not give her up for adoption. We helped a lot as Kelly was only 17 when Opal was born. However, Kelly would rarely help with parenting even when she was available. Even asking her to watch Opal for an hour while we ran errands was an issue. It was rare that Kelly wouldn't complain about why she had to be there to look after Opal. Kelly chose not to attend college after graduation. She had a job with a flexible schedule, yet she rarely made herself available for Opal. Kelly was only home to sleep or get dressed for some party. She also relied on us to purchase supplies and book appointments for Opal. Eddie and I would have serious talks with Kelly that she needed to step up as a parent. Kelly would only make empty promises and never follow through on them. Kelly moved out when Opal was 6. Kelly comes around maybe once a fortnight and for holidays, but Eddie and I have been the ones to raise Opal. Opal is doing extremely well. She has good friends, plays tennis, participates in volunteer projects, and plans to be a marine biologist after graduation. The school year ended for Opal last week, so we had a nice dinner to celebrate her good grades. Kelly came, along with several other family members. We were all chatting and enjoying dinner together when Kelly stood up to make an announcement. She announced to us that she was pregnant with her boyfriend's kid. We already were upset because this was supposed to be Opal's special moment, and Kelly announcing her pregnancy was completely inappropriate. Eddie and I said nothing, and Kelly started to say how she and her boyfriend were so busy with life right now. Eddie and I interrupted Kelly and told her we would have nothing to do with raising this new baby and would not be providing anything for it, supplies, childcare, etc. Kelly flipped out and an argument ensued. Kelly called us heartless and claimed that we were willing to throw our grandkid away. Eddie and I called her selfish for expecting us to raise another kid. We're too old to raise a baby. Kelly is 33 and needs to grow up. Give the baby up for adoption or be a parent and raise it yourself. Kelly left in tears. Now the family has broken into sides. The ones agreeing with Kelly say that we adopted Opal and are sending a message that we don't care about our newest grandbaby. Others are saying we should have taken her aside privately instead of shooting her down in front of everyone, and our reaction was cruel. Eddie and I feel we had to be blunt with Kelly and not sugarcoat reality. Opal likes to show us stories from here sometimes, so I thought it would be a good place to ask for a neutral perspective. Am I the jerk? Edit. Opal is always able to express her feelings with me or Eddie. Opal also has a therapist who is available to speak whenever she needs it. Opal visited the therapist weekly during middle school, but now hasn't needed to see him for more than once a month. We will be taking Opal on a mall trip to make up for what happened at the celebration dinner. We spoke privately to Opal after this incident, and she knows we in no way view her as a burden. Our granddaughter is a blessing, and many of our happiest moments involved supporting Opal and watching her grow up. But Opal is 16. She doesn't need the kind of constant attention and care that a newborn baby does. We are now too old to be able to adequately raise a newborn baby, even if we wanted to. The biggest problem is that Kelly is now an adult and needs to start acting like one. Kelly is supposed to outlive us. The reality is that Eddie and I aren't going to be around for her or her kids' entire lives. It's why Kelly needs to accept that she cannot expect us to take on her responsibilities and she must be independent. Edit 2. Several people have informed me that the part where Kelly expected us to raise the baby was unclear, so I apologized for that. I thought it was self-explanatory, but realized none of you actually experienced what happened. Kelly talked about how busy she and her boyfriend were with their lives, then began to talk about how grateful she was that we would always look after our grandkids, and how since we had gained so much joy from raising Opal, we would be even happier raising this second baby. After Eddie and I called her out, Kelly confirmed that she had expected us to adopt and raise this second baby as well. Kelly said how she and her boyfriend did not have time to raise a baby, but that putting up the baby for adoption would be throwing it away. She assumed we, at almost 60 years old, would have no trouble or opposition raising a newborn baby. I think you're not the jerk. Kelly is a deadbeat mother. How does Opal feel about this? Opal was pushed aside by her own mother and ignored, and now her mom is going out and starting a new family with another guy. But what happened to Opal and her mother's relationship? It's non-existent. Kelly is a deadbeat, a nobody. I'm sorry, I know she's your daughter, but it's true. She's a horrible person. You were blunt with Kelly. Good. She deserves a kick in the behind. It was terrible for her to announce at her daughter's graduation party. Kelly is selfish, so it's only fair you give her the same horrible treatment back and call her out in front of everyone there. I hope nothing but the best for Opal. Your daughter has already completely disregarded Opal, making her, good news, I have a baby now, announcement at the end of the school year party for Opal is some more grade A trash behavior. It's not a graduation party, is it? Because that would make it even worse behavior on Kelly's part. You may not have let them know in the most civil way possible, but I'm gonna say not the jerk because of how thoroughly Kelly has made it clear her daughter doesn't matter. You may have eventually raised her enough to call it adoption, but that was never the original intent, so Kelly can buzz off. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or Kelly? Please let us know. I'll never understand why deadbeats who don't want to take care of their kids keep having them. I went from school teacher to chairman of the board of a big company for the sake of revenge. When I was a tiny kid, my father was my best friend. He worked multiple jobs to support my family, all while powering his way through law school. He even built a couple of small businesses from the ground up with a couple of his friends. All while doing this, he managed to be the best dad ever, spending as much time as he could with my mother, myself, and my baby siblings. One day, we found out that he had stage 4 stomach cancer, the kind that you don't recover from. My mother and I stayed by his side all the way till it was all over. The last memory I have of my father was when he was completely immobile, practically a vegetable at this point, with tubes going in and out of his body, and me just praying that he'd still be able to remember who I was. All the guy could do was smile at me, just to let me know he still recognized his son, even if the doctor told us most of his memories would be gone. Eventually, he fell into a coma for some days before waking up to say goodbye to my mother, who was by his side when he passed. She was a housewife, so we really didn't have much to go on after his passing. Enter my grandfather. He was one of those self-centered boomer types who makes everything about himself. After my father passed, he'd used the newspaper obituary to boast about my dad's grades and achievements, which I realized seemed to be the only thing my dad was to him. Just in case you were wondering, yes, we are Asian. My mother was grieving and trying to find a way to make ends meet, and my grandfather graciously offered to help her control my father's 2 businesses to help support us. My mother agreed because she didn't have any experience. While we grew up, the 2 businesses didn't provide much for us, likely because my father was one of the big reasons they were thriving. Mom was in and out of multiple jobs just to keep us floating. My grandfather offered to help put me and my siblings through school. I managed to score some scholarships with some good grades growing up, so thankfully he didn't have to do as much for me, but we were really glad that he helped out with my siblings. After I made it out of school, I found out that my family was broke and my 2 siblings were still making their way through medical school. My sister even offered to stop and just get a job, but I told her to keep going because she was doing so well and that she deserved to graduate. My grandparents had cut us off because they didn't approve of the directions my siblings took in life, especially my sister, who was, for them, not supposed to have a career in medicine. My grandmother's a real jerk. Why are you wasting your time and money becoming a doctor? You're just going to have kids and quit. I was working as a high school teacher when I was contacted by one of my dad's old business partners for one of his companies. After I asked him about how the company was doing, he told me that my grandfather, who was still in control of my father's shares, was siphoning money from the company for himself, and he was earning way more than he was giving me and my siblings for our education. So all our lives, he had been making us feel indebted to him for money that was supposed to be ours to begin with, and he lied to us, telling us that Dad's companies weren't making any money for us at all. We also realized that when he cut us off, he was cutting us off from our own money, forcing my siblings to drop out and give up careers that they had been working their whole lives for. What's worse is that this was our father's money, and we knew that he had wanted it to help us provide for our futures, even after he passed, and here comes his jerk father, basically crapping on his legacy for his own enrichment. I even found out that he used his position to take possession of the company's office space and force them to set up shop in a smaller, cheaper office while renting the original space out under his own name to the company's competitors to make money from them too, all while I had to work multiple jobs to help my mother and siblings pay the bills. Cue revenge. My grandfather's biggest weakness has always been his pride. In fact, I suspect that he wanted us to think he was helping support us out of his own pocket because he wanted everyone to think he was some kind of hero, when in reality, he was financially choking us. I recognize that no matter what my grandfather said, my siblings, my mother, and I were legally the owners of my father's company shares. So after having his statement signed by 3 of them, I approached all the board of directors, sans my grandfather, and let them know that I was now the sole representative of my late dad's estate. My grandfather also made himself chairman of the board. According to the company records, he did no work for the company at all, so the position was just a name that allowed him to receive money. So I convinced them that since he was only chairman as representative of my father's estate, that made me the chairman. I did not intend to keep the position because I did not have the experience for it. Then I contacted other members of my extended family about my grandfather's unethical practices with the company's office space. He was eventually pressured by them into evicting the company's main competitor from their office space. Serves them right for conniving with my grandfather to take the company's old office space. At the next board meeting, I prepared for the moment I'd been waiting my entire life for. When he entered the conference room to preside over the meeting as the chairman, he found his chair facing away from the table with all the board members already seated at the table. And like a Bond villain, I spun the chair around to reveal to him that I'd been the one sitting there the entire meeting. I told him that the company and my family no longer needed him, and that I'd be taking control over representation of my father's estate. "Do you know that I'm the one who put him and his siblings through school?" he said in shock. I only went, "No, Dad did." The look of sheer embarrassment on his face was perfect. I've never seen him look defeated my entire life until that moment, and this sort of satisfaction could not be achieved by simply ratting him out. I stepped down from the chairman position and took a job in the company's treasury department as a bookkeeper with a meager salary. But at least now, any profit sharing or dividends that the company released would go where my father wanted it to go. And finally, one of the first decisions I got to make as a board member before stepping down was to give my mother a permanent job that she deserved. My grandfather is now jobless. He spends all his time at home, and because he spent his life being selfish and self-centered, he has no friends. All he had going for him was being able to power trip over other people and boasting about his assets and achievements. Even my grandmother has had it with him, and the two don't even sleep in the same room anymore. I hope he lives the rest of his short life, regretting that he didn't live his life with more compassion and humility. Edit. I've gotten a lot of comments about the legality of what went on. During all this, the only lawyer working in the company was my grandfather, and we all know he never did anything. When we hired a team of actual helpful lawyers, they told us exactly the same things you guys pointed out. They're still trying to clean everything up so we don't get into big trouble. Update. Apparently, my sister saw this post and just informed me that he's kinda miserable now because his wife is angry at him because he siphoned what's left of their money to an extramarital sugar baby he had and probably another attempt at getting someone to affirm and glorify him. I guess he hasn't learned. Am I the jerk for pulling my horse from public lessons? I, 16 female, own a lovely dapple gray mare, Mustang. She's 22 and getting older, but still has tons of spunk and energy. While I was in school, I allowed the place I board at to use her for lessons in return for halved board fee. I'm only 16 and I couldn't ride her much. She did great with it, and she mostly helped out beginner riders and newcomers, leaving the more advanced things to me. Now that school is out for the summer, I was thinking of pulling her, but didn't since I knew they'd need all hands on deck for this summer camp I volunteered to do. Literally free of charge for babysitting and letting them use my horse from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. We usually just walk the horses on the trail and escort the newer kids, which is fine and easy. The issue arises when an older kid, let's call him Leo, starts riding. His family owns a barn, and he's been gearing up to ride his own horse, assuring me that he can tack up my horse just fine, despite not riding English pretty much ever. I oblige, trusting him, and go to help out with the craft table since all heck has broken loose. I end up hearing my horse was acting up on the trail and for trotting, which never happens unless she's in heat. I figured she was just having a bad day, but after untacking her, I was practically livid. Her girth was incredibly tight and on a way higher setting than I usually do. She was snippy and clearly uncomfortable. I just gave her a rest day and followed Leo out when he was riding again the next day. As Leo is riding around in the arena, he's incredibly heavy-handed, even after I tell him to stop. He doesn't post at the trot and keeps kicking even when unnecessary. He keeps tightening the girth up too high and will not listening to me. I'm fuming at this point and pull him off the horse, explaining that my mare is fine and he's using too much force. He just kinda nods and goes to untack her, but I keep having to follow behind him to fix the things he messes up. Apparently, he talked to his mother about it, and the barn owner had a chat with me in the tack room about how I need to be more gentle on the campers and that she's allowing my horse to participate out of the kindness of her heart. It felt horrible, but I really felt like I was in the right. So I told her, in a fit of rage, which was not my best moment, that my mare would be going back to private riding and would be pulled from lessons. I backed out of the camp as well and only help every now and then. My barn friends are livid since they're now one horse and one counselor short, and I do feel bad for just some petty thing. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. Sounds to me like you aren't taking issue with campers or inexperienced riders, you're taking issue with someone who is deliberately ignoring your instructions on how to treat your horse. I don't know anything about horses, but I do know that a big part of learning to work with animals is accepting that they are all different and you need to tailor your treatment of them based on their personalities and preferences. If the program doesn't support and understand your concern, it's probably best to pull your horse from public riding. I would like to add that horse people are never your friends. In my 16+ years of experience, I came to the conclusion that 99% are potential jerks. Another per diem tale. Not mine, but a friend's. He's a heavy equipment operator for a company that builds temporary roads for power line, logging, pipeline jobs, that sort of thing. The crew meets up at the yard and travels out to the job site for the first day of the job. They're given a per diem for hotel accommodations for remote jobs, but my friend has a short school bus that he's converted into a camper, so he pockets the per diem. He sleeps in the camper and cooks his own food rather than eat in the restaurant. He gets along well with the rest of the crew and is able to use their rented rooms for showers and such. These guys were local to the yard. Some would get their spouse to drop them off, and one guy would ride his bicycle in. As time went on, the company depended on him to transport a handful of crew members from the yard to the site, from the site back to the hotel, and the next morning from the hotel to the site. His converted bus still had a row of seats, so 4 people sat there and another in the passenger seat with their luggage piled in the back. Some jerk administrator chewed him out for pocketing the per diem and sleeping in the camper and told him that he must rent a hotel room if he was to receive the per diem. So the next job. He shows up at the yard in his Honda Civic. They have their meeting and it's time to roll, except that the Civic has his gear and his luggage in the back with the seats folded down. There's no room and there's 5 guys standing there with no transportation. Foreman asks him what's going on, and my buddy explains that since he's been told not to stay in the camper, he doesn't see any reason to pay the extra gas to drive it to the site. The foreman finds out which penny pincher lit my friend up and calls the project manager and asks him exactly how Mr. Pennypincher plans to cover the costs of getting the crew to the job site. Project manager authorizes foreman to go and rent an SUV and then blasts Mr. Pennypincher. The SUV is a couple of $100 a day, plus mileage. The crew is late to the first day on the job, but that wasn't the big problem. This is a construction job in the boonies, and the crew that piled into the SUV daily were filthy. When they returned the rental SUV, they were hit with an exorbitant cleaning fee. The next job, foreman told my friend that he was now okay to sleep in his camper and pocket the per diem. My friend said that he rather liked staying in the hotel room. He was fine with it, but since he was saving the company the cost of the rental SUV, if they bumped his per diem up, he'd be happy to chauffeur the crew. They did. Sure, I'll take your pennies. I was working at a gas station about 20 years ago. One evening, this lady comes in, dumps like 5 or 6 handfuls of pennies on the counter, and states her preferred brand. Ordinarily, our cashiers would just tell someone to buzz off if they were trying to do this, But I was pretty chill at the time, and I had nothing to do but run the register and stuff my face with food from the deli. So, cue malicious compliance. I just said, okay, but I'll have to take other customers. I'll count this between. She objects. It's all there. I counted it already. I reply, if my drawer comes up wrong, I'll get in trouble. I have to count it. Sorry. She starts stomping around the store, all mad, throwing her arms around, etc. I would later come to recognize this as behavior of someone who's on something. And I start counting, meticulously setting the pennies aside in stacks of 10 and pausing every time a customer comes in. All the while, this lady is acting like she's been hurt. Maybe half a dozen customers, and 10 minutes later, I'm nearing the end of the pile. She's still standing by the door, getting more and more impatient, complaining at everyone who comes through. I was giving the other customers priority, so they didn't care, of course. Anyway, I finished counting and she's short, maybe 15 cents. Who could remember? It was fairly common for people to raid the penny dish to cover the cost of a pack of cigarettes they couldn't quite afford. And this was generally allowed. Small town, and after all, who even cares? But she promised me it was all there, and I got a bit bugged about it. So I take the overflowing free penny dish and move it behind the counter before calling her over. You're X cents short. Can't I just cover it from the dish? Where is it? What dish? There's a dish. There's always a dish. You took it away. I give her a puzzled look, wave my hands over the counter. There's no dish. I don't know what you're talking about. She is incensed and loses it on me for a while. I just shrug it off. She left without her cigarettes, of course. My boss came over afterward and told me I didn't have to count those or even take them. Dude did not get me at all, but I just played it straight and was like, oh, okay. Weekend warriors. About 10 years ago, I worked for a local company that sold power equipment. Most of our clients were landscapers and contractors who either bought or had equipment repaired regularly. We knew all of our regulars. It was a great place to work, partly because the owner and our manager had a zero-tolerance policy for customers and clients who were jerks towards employees. They supported us, trained us well, and didn't gaslight us when we had to deal with jerks. For the most part, our regulars were great, but the weekend warrior, do-it-yourself guys were terrible. Most of them had more money than sense and did not need anything we sold for their home projects. One summer, we had hired a young woman to help on the sales floor on the weekend. She was still in college and kind of lacked in confidence. She was great. She had an agricultural background. She just didn't know our products yet. One Saturday morning, she got stuck with a weekend warrior who wanted to buy a lawnmower. He was looking at something ridiculous, a commercial-grade, zero-turn hustler with a 54-inch deck. He was not mowing acreage. He did not have a farm. He lived in the suburbs. She took him outside to look at some of the mowers, and before long, we could hear him yelling. The manager hurried outside. I was working on a special order when she came back into the store, trying not to angry cry. The owner told her to take a break. The manager finished the sale, and the man then had to go somewhere else to buy a trailer to haul it home because he hadn't planned for that part. When the dust had settled, I asked the manager what happened. He said the man started yelling and calling her names because she didn't know how to turn on the mower and had offered to go get someone else. The fact that he was asking the question indicated he also did not know how to turn on the mower. I'm no longer shocked at the number of people who will drop thousands of dollars on things they don't know how to use. Later that day, the owner came over to me, sighed heavily, and told me the guy had called, demanding we mail him a copy of the manual because he didn't get one. All of the manuals and links to repairs and parts for all of these products we sold were on our website. But no, he wanted a hard copy because he had already been insulted enough and shouldn't have to find it himself. When I brought up the manual, it was 90 pages long, 45 pages in English, 45 pages in Spanish. I printed off the Spanish copy and left it for the mailman. I told the owner what I did when I arrived at work the next day. He just started laughing. When the guy called in to complain, the owner apologized and told him a lot of our clients speak Spanish, so we didn't want to assume people only spoke English. The guy returned the mower. We're pretty sure he couldn't figure out how to get it off the trailer. We sold it a week later to a landscaping company. Am I the jerk for throwing all of my mother-in-law's things out of my bedroom? My mother-in-law moved in with me, female 25, and my husband, male 26, a week ago, while her house is being renovated. The renovations were being done on the second floor, so she had no reason to leave the house, but she said the noise makes her anxious. She didn't go to stay with any of her sons, who have larger homes, but came to stay with us in our one-bedroom apartment. My husband brought her in without even telling me. She brought about 4 huge bags with her and asked if she could put some of her things in my bedroom. I said absolutely and gave all the sock drawers to keep her things in, though I wasn't feeling comfortable with her barging in all the time and invading my privacy just to grab something of hers. She started complaining about lack of storage to put her dresses and makeup in and asked if I could share my closet with her, but I said no for many reasons. One of them is because I need privacy, and my closet is where I keep all my personal things. She huffed and puffed, but dropped it eventually. I went to work and got home at 8. I entered my bedroom and noticed something strange. I opened my closet and all of my things were gone. Her things, like dresses and blouses, were hanging on or folded on the side. I was so confused, I immediately asked her about it, and she stood near the door and nonchalantly said she borrowed my closet to store her expensive things, since keeping them in bags or in the sock drawers was causing damage. I furiously asked where all my things were. She pointed at a different cabinet in the living room and said all my clothes were there, and as for makeup, jewels were at the bottom of the kitchen cabinet. I lost it completely. I grabbed all her clothes that were inside my closet and threw them out of my bedroom. She starts yelling and then started looking for her phone to call my husband. I told her that I shouldn't be basically kicked out of my own space and told her to take her things and leave. My husband came over and started yelling at me, saying I was way out of line. He told me that all his mom asked me was to share, but I was being petty for no reason. I told him it's my room, and he lashed back, saying it was his room too, and I was being ridiculous. He then went off on me for telling her to leave, but I took my stuff and went to stay with my mom. He tried to speak to me, saying it was me who caused this fight, and saying that he already told me this is all just temporary till his mom's house is done being renovated. He said my reaction was wrong and made his mom upset. He asked me to let it go and get right with his mom and reach a compromise. Am I the jerk for how I reacted? Not the jerk. Stay at your mom's until your mother-in-law is out, and you need to think long and hard about counseling or divorce. Mama's boys are not good husbands or fathers. Do not even consider having kids with this man. This is a big, major husband problem. Not the jerk. First off, your husband brings her in without checking with you. Then when she takes over your space, he sides with her. Do you have anywhere else you can go or someone else you can stay with? If your husband is this devoted to his mom, he can have her keep him company instead of you. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her husband? Please let us know.
He sounds like even more of a mama's boy than you, Reddit boy.
Play stupid games at work, win stupid prizes. Early last year, I started working as a contractor supporting one of the many government agencies here in the US. My job description was pretty simple. Act as administrative support for a particular federal employee. In effect, I'm a glorified secretary. I push papers, schedule and file things, and act as a gopher when necessary. The job wasn't particularly difficult, but it really helped that the Fed and I got along like a house on fire. The problem is, the Fed I work for doesn't get along with another Fed who works in the same office. Their job descriptions have nothing to do with each other, and there is really very little need for them to interact with each other. But for some reason, which I still don't know, there was bad blood between them. Cue the lockdown. Our office went from a steady workload to a maximum telework position, and just like that, there was no work for the contractors to do. No more pushing papers, no more scheduling or filing things, and no more acting as a gopher. Just long days sitting in my cubicle reading Reddit on my phone. The Fed I support decides that we'll take the opportunity to clean out 2 offices in another building that haven't been used for years so they can be repurposed. It sat idle for years because no one wanted to clean them. These rooms are filthy with electronics that were old in the 90s, old break room food, cables everywhere, the works. As we get started, I'm happy to be there as cleaning these rooms means I finally have something to do. Better yet, the Fed I worked for was right there with me, elbow deep in garbage. After the first day, we've made solid progress on one of the rooms, but it took 8 hours of hard labor to get there. I go back to my cubicle to gather my things to go home and find the other Fed waiting for me.
Where have you been all day?
I've been in the other building helping my Fed clean out a room.
That's not in your job description. You don't need to be helping this person do that.
I really don't mind. It's better than sitting around on the government's dime doing nothing. And besides, my job is to support this person. If they want me to help them clean out a room, I'm more than happy to help.
No, you can't be doing that. If it's not in your job description, then it's not your job. This Fed should know better than to take advantage of your good nature and make you do work that you weren't hired for.
I'm sorry, you're going to have to take this up with my Fed. As far as I know, my job is to support this person in whatever way they need, including physical labor.
We'll see about that.
The next day, my Fed and I go back to the other building to work. We're 10 minutes into cleaning when the other Fed shows up with a member of the union in tow. The Fed then rips into my Fed for forcing me to do work outside of the scope of my duties and brought the union representative to back up this opinion. The funny thing was, the union rep had no idea what he was doing there. Neither my Fed nor I are members of the union, and his opinion really had nothing to do with the situation. The other Fed brought him in to use as a prop. To his credit, he seemed to know that, because he just gave us an uncomfortable shrug with a look like, I have no idea why I'm here either, and said nothing at all. Rather than fight about it, my Fed surrenders gracefully, and the two of us reluctantly leave the uncleaned rooms behind. A week later, I was sent home after guidance came down from Washington saying that since there was no work being done, contractors were no longer needed to support the Feds on staff until lockdown ended. I sat home for about a day before getting a call from my company telling me another division needed me. This would be a permanent change of office, and as long as I didn't mind the risk of getting sick, I could start immediately. Fast forward several months to November. I'm happily working away in my new office when the Fed who had a problem with my helping clean the rooms comes in to speak with some of the employees in my new office. This person is absolutely livid because the two rooms had finally been reassigned but still needed to be cleaned before they could be turned over to their new owners. This Fed was called into work specifically to clean the rooms, despite still being on maximum telework status, because there was no one else they could call. All of the contractors who had supported them had already been reassigned, and there was nothing in this person's job description that said that they could be assigned this particular duty. Apparently, it took almost 2 weeks of backbreaking labor to clean out the rooms until they were good enough to transfer. The best part was, this person seems to have completely forgotten what part I had to play in this little drama, because when they came to my office to complain about the injustice of it all to anyone who would listen, they stood right in front of my desk to do so. I got to hear every word of the story right from this horse's mouth.
Support our channel by joining as a member today, and we'll give you a shout out in our next video.
Or come watch this video next. You won't believe what Karen does in that one.